morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to write a decimal as a fraction. So the best way to do this is to say the decimal out loud because it helps you understand what fraction it actually is. Just a reminder, any number in this position is a tenths decimal, any in this position is a hundredths decimal, and any decimal in this third position is a thousandths decimal. So if I look at this here, I have it in the first decimal place, which is in the tenths place. So if I was going to say this decimal out loud, I'd say 0 wholes and 3 tenths. What does that look like? Well, that looks like 3 out of 10, or 3 tenths. And that's how I can write my decimal. The tenths makes a 10 at the bottom. The 3 from the actual decimal goes on the top. Now this works for other decimal places too, but when I have a whole number, I have to write it a little bit differently. So if I was going to say this number out loud, I'd say 20 and 7 hundredths, because the 7 is in the hundredths place and it's a 0 before the 7. So if that's what my number looks like, I have my 7 hundredths, so 7 out of, and I get my hundredth from the hundredths place. But I also have a whole number with it, so I write this as a mixed fraction. It looks a little bit like this, 20 and 7 hundredths. What about if I have a number just in the thousandths place? I have zeros in these other ones. How would I say that number? Well, I'd say 1,000th. How would I write that? I'd write the 1 on the top because that's my decimal, and on the bottom, because we are in the thousandths, I'd write a 1,000. There's my fraction again. Now these three are fairly straightforward, fairly simple, because they only have a position in either the tenths, the hundredths, or a thousandth. This one only has it in the hundredths, there's nothing in the tenths. This one only has it in the thousandths, there's nothing in the tenth or hundred. It gets a little bit more complicated when you have numbers in 2 different decimal places at once. So if I wanted to say this number, I could say 2 tenths and 3 hundredths, but then it's going to look a little bit weird. So the other way you can say this number is by looking at the last digit here. This last digit is in the hundredths position. So therefore, this question is going to be in hundredths. And then I just look at the number as a whole. This number altogether, if I took out the decimal, would be 23. So therefore, I have 23 hundredths. How would I write that? Well, I'd write a 23 on the top. And because it's in hundredths, I'd write a 100 on the bottom, just like that. And that works for mixed numbers as well. So let's look at this one. I have 10 wholes, and look at the last place, that's in the 1, 2, 3, that's in the thousandths. So somehow this is going to be in the thousandths. And how many thousandths do I have? I take that number as a whole, 341 thousandths. So how would I write that? Well, I'd start with my 341, and because we're doing thousandths, we put it over 1,000, and then my whole number just goes in front as a mixed number altogether. There we go. What about this one? I have a 0 here, but that's not going to faze me. I'm still going to count my places. This is the third place, so I'm still in thousandths. And then I look. I could underline all 3, but when you have a 0 in front, you don't really count it in your number, right? So I could say I have 13 thousandths, or I could just say I have 13 thousandths, and that's what I'd write down, 13 over 1,000, just like that. Now I have a few bonus questions for us as well. Let's take a look at these last 2 ones. They follow very, very similar ideas. So if I have 0.5, that number is in the tenths position, so I have 5 tenths. I write that as 5 over 10. But if I look at those numbers, those actually simplify. I can reduce this. Both 5 and 10 fit 5 in them, so that fraction could change into 1/2. That's the same amount as this fraction here, and that's the same amount as that decimal over there as well. Huh, interesting. Let's try that again with this one. So this one is 84 hundredths. So once again, it's over 100, so I do 100. because that's the last digit's place. And then I put 84 on the top. And yes, that does simplify down again. I know both of those are divisible by 2 at the very least. So if I divide that by 2, I get 42 over 50. And I can divide that by 2 again. That gives me 21 over 25. There we go. So that fraction is the same as this fraction, which is the same as this decimal. So that is my most reduced fraction. I don't think you'll have to do any of that today, but it's something interesting to note because we might be doing more with that another time. There you go, grade 4s.